In previous videos, I've described Goetia as the art of communicating with spirits of the underworld, something that goes far beyond the 72 demons in the Ars Goetia. If we accept there exists a multitude of spirits to contact, how do we learn who they are? Given their variety, can there still be a systematic approach? That's where Emergent Goetia comes in. Hey folks, this is James, aka Threscurnis, and today I'm going to tell you about my personal evocation system, which I'm calling Emergent Goetia. It's going to be a long one, so strap in. I think you'll find it useful, as it gives the magus a framework in which to hang their own goals and beliefs. I'll be using my own work in evoking ancient Egyptian demons as an example, but it can apply to all spirits. Not saying it will work for all spirits, some will respond to specific rituals. However, using the Emergent Goetia system is a good place to start when information on an underworld spirit you're trying to evoke is sparse or non-existent. We have a lot to cover here, and I'll start by saying that Emergent Goetia took form pretty much the same way as emergent magic as a whole. It has a chaos magic approach, yet also follows principles of emergent magic and how you build your own system. My journey started with two revelations. I accept that our prehistoric ancestors could contact spirits with little more than a stick, a fire, a drum, and a handful of mushrooms. I wanted to work with the grimoires, but needed to know if all that material, some of which is extremely hard to obtain for the modern practitioner, was necessary. The conclusion I came to was no, it's not necessary, but perhaps the details in the grimoires are a refinement, a more consistent way to contact and interact with spirits. The second question, did I want to speak with any of the spirits listed in the grimoires? Maybe those spirits are so popular because they are easier to contact and some information is known about what they do. But I've never been one to follow the pack, and I wanted to talk to spirits more inclined to be my friends than the ones I had little connection with. Thus Emergent Goetia was born. I determined that the grimoires, with their long history and many testimonials of success from modern magicians, could still be of use. To that end, I examined multiple grimoires and looked for the commonalities, then applied those commonalities to my work while adding specific elements I believed would be recognized by the spirits I wanted to communicate with. In this case, those Egyptian demons I talked about in the last episode, specifically spirits associated with the god Thoth. While going over all of these elements, keep in mind that they don't show up in all grimoires, but they appear in enough of them to be considered a shared method. First off, you've got to have some allies. You may recall me quoting Gordon White, "Magic is, if anything, extra-dimensional diplomacy." And one thing you need to have in diplomacy is allies. Any magus worth their salt has probably already made friends with various gods and other entities. It is among these spirits that you should seek your first allies. The easiest spirit allies most magi can make are their own ancestors, because they have a vested interest in your success. I highly recommend starting a daily practice of ancestor veneration. And I say daily because the nature of your relationship with your ancestors should not simply be a means of exchange or bolstering your ranks. It should be personal, with both sides acknowledging the other as friends and family. interested more in maintaining those bonds and providing comfort and healing to each other. Examples of evoking in the name of allied gods can be found in almost every grimoire conjuration. In the Grimoire Verum, one of the universal conjurations instructs the magus to call up spirits in the name of the great living God, with the power of holy and sacred names. Quote, I conjure thee by the name of the great living God, sovereign creator of all things, that thou appear in human form, fair and agreeable, without noise or inconvenience, to answer truthfully in all the interrogations that I shall make. I conjure thee to do this by the power of the holy and sacred names. We know these grimoires come from a Christian perspective, because they were most likely written by churchmen, the most literate class at the time. We have a good idea who they thought the great and living God was, especially grimoires that supposedly come to us from King Solomon. We can only assume they mean the tribal god of the Israelites. Why use names copied from a grimoire if you have no real connection to those spirits? Many magi will do amazing feats of mental gymnastics to justify their use, claiming those names represent divine forces that don't really carry all of the cultural baggage that most people associate with them, or that the nature of these Judeo-Christian spirits is occulted and don't truly reflect the nature of the spiritual tradition they represent. I find this kind of excuse-making, at worst, bullshit, and at best, unnecessary. When choosing your spirit allies, always go with spirits with which you have a good relationship. As you have already guessed, for me, that's the big man, Jehudi, aka Beaky Nose Bitch Tits, aka Thoth. It can also be helpful to have a gatekeeper spirit as an ally, a spirit that commonly acts as a go-between, interacting with both the material and the spirit world. Many spirits fit the bill, and one should pick a spirit that has either reached out to you at some point or that shares your worldview. In his book, The True Grimoire, an analysis of the Grimoire Verum, Jake Stratton Kent identifies the spirit Skirlin as fulfilling this role. From Jake, this is the great intermediary of the system, who in common with Legba and Voodoo, Exo or Elegua and Santeria and Umbanda, Ganesha and Hinduism, and Yanis, Hecate, Anubis, and various other gods of antiquity, is to be invoked first, so that the others may be contacted through his good offices. His authority is as that of the emperor, which is to say that Skirlin's intermediary role avoids the necessity of the magician continually disturbing the chief of all spirits. In various ways, Skirlin also corresponds to the concept of the holy guardian angel. Personally, I've used the demon Amut, who guards the entrance of the Egyptian underworld, as my gatekeeper go-between. She stands at the precipice between petitioners and the duat, and thus fulfills that role. No matter whom you choose, it's always good to have someone who can make introductions. The second commonality is circles. Almost every grimoire is replete with circles. Circles surrounding sigils, pinned to the clothes of the magician for protection. Circles encapsulating the sigils of the entities the magician is attempting to evoke. Circles on the ground for the magician to stand in and do their work. Most learn how to make a magic circle early in their career, and those skills will serve them well in Goetia. This may be review for many of us, but can still be helpful to determine the essence of what a circle means in order to use it well in practice. A circle represents the most efficient way to demark space. A single line, marks an area where everything then becomes what is inside and what is outside the circle. For the Magus, this means the creation of liminal space, an area that is both inside and outside our own world. In popular culture, we often see demons trapped within a circle. In the classical grimoires, the Magus usually stands in their own circle, while the demon is brought into a triangle. But the circle need not be an impenetrable boundary, and I would argue that in many ways, it's the opposite. In Richard Kuykeiffer's Forbidden Rites, a necromancer's manual of the 15th century, he notes, "The circle as a locus of power, enhancing the power of the operator, is ancient. It appears, for example, in an early Jewish story of Ani the circle drawer, and in the Greek magical papyri. The further notion that the circle protects the magician from demons may well have originated with moralists such as Caesarius, as a symbolic way of talking about how hazardous it is to conjure demons, even if it was eventually taken over by the necromancers themselves. The circle creates a space where the magus, the spirit, or both can more easily cross between worlds. As many spirits are seen as existing outside our dimension, or at least not entirely physical, a good host helps their guests across barriers. The tradition of the red carpet began to give guests a clear path free of obstacles to enter an event. Your circle can serve the same purpose. In the end, a simple line drawn in the dirt with a stick will suffice. But as mentioned, the more work you put into it, the more consistent and specific the results. The classical grimoires often direct the magus to fill the circle with symbols and names that the magus aligns themselves with, and general glyphs that show the magus has a deeper understanding of the universe, such as astrological and elemental symbols. Many will wish to create a permanent or semi-permanent circle containing such symbols specific to the magus's own paradigm. As I've said before, I am not a scholar. I don't read any language besides English, but lucky for me, there's a lot in translation, and I do know how to use Academia EDU. This is my circle, with the cobra, a symbol of authority. The snake coils in somewhat the same way as seen in the grimoires. Inside are prayers to Thoth, I found on that aforementioned Academia EDU. I also included the lotus, the most often depicted symbol in ancient Egypt, which for me is a symbol of mental transformation, given the psychedelic properties of the blue lotus. No one can tell you exactly what your specific symbol set should be. Just a word of advice. Given that magic is often performed around open flames and pointy objects, best create a circle that does not present a tripping hazard. I also provide a vessel for the spirits. The most basic way to influence the physical world is to simply occupy space. Certainly, many things that affect the physical world, electricity, gravity, light, they don't have a spatial dimension or have physical dimensions so minute as to be imperceptible to our senses. But the majority of things in our world interact through having a place in it, and at times it can be helpful to provide a place for your spirit guest to occupy while visiting. Returning to the analogy of diplomacy, when the foreign delegation comes to visit, make sure they have a place to stay. The tradition of hospitality runs deep in many ancient cultures for a good reason. Provide something pleasing for the spirit to inhabit while making contact. In the Crowley Mathers version of the Lesser Key of Solomon, the magician is instructed to shut up the spirit in a vessel made of brass. Another grimoire, translated by Francis Barrett, a 19th century English magician, called The Magic and Philosophy of Trithemius of Spanheim. Part of the lengthy subtitle of the book describes it as the art of drawing spirits into crystals. It would seem that the traditional methods for containing these types of spirits involved objects associated with the element of earth. And this makes sense, in that they are a spiritual grounding. Other methods may be employed, such as bottling, which has a long history in the witchcraft tradition. These items need not be seen as a trap, simply a place for the spirit to anchor themselves to this dimension. If possible, tailor the object to the individual or type of spirit you evoke. You may have a standard vessel that you use, but it can be helpful to ask the spirits themselves what they wish to inhabit. I started with a pyramid made of a composite stone, choosing the pyramid as it's a symbol pretty much synonymous with Egypt. The second pyramid you see here is a good example of the emergent nature of my work. After the word onyx came up multiple times in multiple spirit box sessions, I then acquired a black onyx pyramid for the spirit, and they seemed to be thankful for the addition. Perhaps the most important tool in the system is the means in which to communicate with the spirit. The magus themselves act as the most basic conduit, with much of the communication coming in the form of feelings and perhaps visions. In some cases, the magus enlists the aid of a seer who is shown to be more sensitive to spirit communication. But no matter if it is the magus or the representative, these impressions can be frustratingly vague, which makes it difficult to attribute meaning to them. And I know this is a little bit of a reversal in some of the other advice that I've given, but I think the conduit really works best when it's tailored to the needs of the magus and not to the specifications of the spirit conjured. One of the most traditional conduits of communication is the scrying mirror. A bowl of water could be used, or really any reflective surface. And once again, examples run through the grimoires, with the most popular being from the Lemegeton, which includes instructions for creating the Mirror of Solomon. Those using Goetic methods tend to favor a black mirror for its distortive properties. Some grimoires describe a mirror of ink. The most famous example is the black obsidian mirror of John Dee, which he employed with his seer Edward Kelly. In most cases, the magus burns incense below the mirror to add more distortion and give the spirit something to manipulate. I use a scrying mirror for every evocation and usually record it so that I can look back and see if I caught anything that I didn't see during the process. However, scrying can be pretty vague, and many wish to develop a method of communication we are more familiar with, language. In achieving that clarity, some have turned to more modern methods. Numerous practitioners have had success with a talking board or Ouija board. This at least produces letters and numbers or answers to yes or no questions, if not words and phrases. As for myself, I find the speed of the talking board frustrating and difficult to do without at least 3 people, 2 to operate the planchette and 1 to record the message. I've begun using an SB7 spirit box, employing the Estes method in almost all of my evocations. This makes the communication almost conversational. The spirit box can be used alone, but does seem to work best with 2 or more people, 1 to listen to the spirit box and another to ask questions. For those unfamiliar with the device, see my video on the paranormal and the occult. Remember, it is a poor magus who contacts things from another realm, beings of pure spirit who may indeed be immortal and live beyond space and time, and fails to record it. With the ubiquity of recording devices at our fingertips, there's really no excuse to not keep a log of all of your communications. In the grimoires, Almost all of these tools the Magus uses are consecrated. The items are dedicated to the work and are marked as sacrosanct. And that's not to say you must seek out all the rare materials described in the grimoires, or even that every tool must be a handcrafted piece of art. If you're using plastic bowls from the dollar store to mix your materia, that's fine. You're using what's available, just like our ancestors have done for thousands of years. I have found it useful to have a couple of standardized consecration rituals. I often consecrate tools in batches to make the process more efficient. Next, you're going to have to give some thought into what it is you're going to say. What is the incantation? And nearly every method given to conjure spirits includes some kind of verbal incantation. In the grimoires, this means naming your spirit allies and give them your own names and titles. Think of the incantation as your introduction. It includes your name and the names of spirits you have built a relationship with. It may include titles that you go by, or simply introduce yourself as Magus, Wizard, Witch, or any moniker you prefer. The incantation should also be a statement of intent. Say why you are contacting the spirit and what you hope to give and receive. It should be polite and not casual, at least until you've developed that type of rapport with the spirit in question. Once again, it can be helpful to think of the spirit and yourself as ambassadors, making first contact with a foreign land and people. Much of my own incantation borrows from the Golden Dawn's Invocation of Thoth, usually attributed to MacGregor Mathers. And some of you may have guessed that I'm not a follower of the Golden Dawn system, but I figured I would be remiss if I didn't at least give this one a try. And it worked for me. And later I learned, after reading those translations, that the Mathers invocation did have many direct quotes from those prayers. It certainly has the rhythm. He added some things, but then again, so did I, like calling on the Ogdoad as the elemental gatekeepers. That's about it for the basic commonalities. There are plenty of others that show up in the grimoires to a greater or lesser degree. Several grimoires give instructions to contact certain spirits only during certain times, usually associated with planetary hours. And this can be as simple as downloading an app that gives you the associations for the day and the hour. I believe the thinking for this comes from the idea that you wouldn't call someone in the middle of the night or when they are otherwise occupied. Be polite and only call when the spirit has made known that they are available. And this can be challenging when contacting uncatalogued spirits who have no associations recorded, which means the Magus must ask after contacting the spirit when they prefer to be called. Okay, that was a long one, and I'm guessing the next video is going to be long as well, as I'm going to let you in on an actual evocation session. It will include a recording of my incantation and the entire spirit box conversation. So you've made it to the part where I ask you to like and subscribe, and that really does help. I'm not going to tell you about our trip to Egypt this time. I'm making a more direct appeal. I know the pace of video releases has slowed down a bit, and the reason is probably something many of you are feeling. The price of gas is up, energy bills are up, food is up, and I need to work more to make ends meet. I spend a lot of time and effort and not a little bit of my own money bringing these videos to you. And due to the nature of YouTube's monetization scheme, it's going to be a long time until a channel like this covering a niche subject is even going to qualify for monetization. So if you can throw a few dollars at my Ko-Fi fundraising page, it would be much appreciated. You don't have to make a monthly donation, but if you do, you'll gain access to scripts of most of our episodes. Of course, you can also go over to our Redbubble store, get Scroll of Thoth merchandise, have a little something for your money. I would very much appreciate it. Thank you for watching till the end. I'll see you next time.